Today, down in the comments, I want to hear about a time where you kind of held off watching a movie for a long time. For whatever reason, you were like, I'm not going to watch this right now, or I'm not going to go see this. And then it turns out that you really liked the movie. I want to hear about those kind of moments of discovery where you're like, what I thought this movie was isn't what this movie is, and I'm glad that I finally sat down with it. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-Shirt, the channel where we take new and reissue horror movies and pair them with pieces of horror literature, horror fiction that you're gonna enjoy if you like those movies. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video if you want to see more like it. I've got plenty of other recommendations for you, book and movie recommendations over on my channel. Today we're diving back into the Arrow Films vaults with two of their newer releases. We're gonna talk about Jim Van Bebber's Deadbeat at Dawn and Taro Ishii's Orgies of Edo. Two very different films that just happened to be released somewhat recently. We're gonna find out if these are movies for you, or if they were movies for me. And as always, we're gonna end things off with a book recommendation. This week's recommendation I think is really good, so try to watch to the end of the video for that. I want to start by talking about Deadbeat at Dawn, which is a movie that I had heard plenty about. Around the time that I kind of first started reading Fangoria, things like that, Jim Van Bebber's Manson Family movie had just been released or was about to be released. And I remember getting that in high school, middle school me, so it's probably going to be taken with a grain of salt. So I just kind of didn't really have any strong desire to be like, I should go back and watch the movie that Jim Van Bebber is kind of famous or infamous for. That was silly of me. It's silly of me that I've waited this long. I waited for this beautiful Arrow Films release to finally catch up with Deadbeat at Dawn. But I'm glad I finally got to watch it because it is amazing. It is an incredible film. I really, really, really like Deadbeat at Dawn. For those who were like me or like looking at the cover or just wondering what kind of movie this is, for some reason I was under the impression that this was like a Last House on the Left type, you know, Last House on Dead End Street, Last House on the Beach kind of style home invasion thing, or like it's so extreme, it's so crazy. It's not. It has a lot more in common with films like The Warriors or Class of 1984. It is a teenage gang movie, a teenage heightened violence, heightened reality gang movie. Shot on a shoestring budget. Van Bebber had taken a few years of film school and then had taken a loan from the school that was supposed to go towards finishing up school. Dropped out of school and was like, you know what, I'm gonna finish my student film. We're gonna finish this movie right. He took that 10 grand and he finished Deadbeat at Dawn, which is he stars in, written, directed by Jim Van Bebber. It has this incredible quality to it. Shot in 16mm. It's DIY independent filmmaking at its very, very best. Came out in 1988, but I believe it was filmed over a series of years before that. It has a remarkably kind of big cast. It has these larger-than-life characters. It's about our kind of main gang member Goose, and he falls for this girl, and he decides that he's gonna leave his gang. He's gonna get out of it, even though he's just kind of offended a rival gang and the leader of a rival gang, and he becomes a target after that. And wouldn't you know it, like he's not the target of the violent attack, and he has to get revenge by any means necessary. It's a movie that really walks the line between enjoyably goofy and legitimately disturbingly gritty. It almost feels like a late 1980s like pissed off teenagers, like the things that they would scroll in the side of a steno notebook, kind of brought to life. A celebration of 1980s teen juvenilia and excess and like drinking and doing drugs and throwing ninja stars and guns and abusive parents and all this like a huge cocktail of terrible things that add up to something kind of wonderful. The movie does not feel oppressive. The movie does not feel like, oh, this is grody for the sake of grody. There's a lot of films of this era and that have this reputation that kind of feel like that to me, but Deadbeat at Dawn doesn't. Deadbeat at Dawn feels like a lot more of like, even though it does get dark at times, it feels a lot more like just a celebration of movie making and a celebration of action films and a celebration of horror movies, because even though it is not really a horror movie, it's more of an action movie. It's a lot closer to The Warriors than it is to, you know, Friday the 13th. But there are incredible gore gags in this movie, incredibly inventive gore gags. There's like a car crash scene later in the movie that's unbelievable. It's like wow, they definitely didn't have permits for this, and they're definitely running the risk of really hurting someone, including like almost killing the director, who is also your star. This is a stacked disc. Arrow did a really nice job. The transfer looks really nice. It is like I think a 16mm negative. It's got the kind of pillboxing on the sides. It's 4x3. There's a ton of features. Van Bebber is very involved in making this disc. There's a whole feature-length documentary. I forget what it's called. Deadbeat Forever. So it's like this. It's almost like a fan documentary because they spend a good amount of time talking to people who have like come to know Van Bebber personally through their enjoyment of his films. And it's a real like nice kind of community feel to this hour and a half. Documentary, and it's not only talking about Deadbeat, it's not only like kind of retrospective, but it talks about what Van Bebber's up to now and what he's doing now. The whole movie shot in Akron, Ohio, and it has this great urban decay feeling to it. I don't know whether Akron's really like that, or whether they were just choosing how to shoot Akron to make it look like a complete wasteland. But either way, it almost makes me want to kind of get on a plane and visit Akron because it's like I want to find the shooting locations and see where they made this movie and see how much this is surviving. But Deadbeat at Dawn, yeah, movie I slept on, a movie for whatever reason I'd like kind of been turned off to when I probably would have enjoyed it most in high school and middle school. But so glad we have this Arrow disc. If you haven't seen it or if you have seen it, I very, very much recommend it. The next movie we're going to talk about does not come with a strong recommendation. I don't think everyone who subscribes to the channel, who watches my videos, is going to quite like it as much as I did. But this is Orgies of Edo. It is a movie by Taro Ishii, who we've talked about on the channel before. Just a couple videos back, we talked about Arrow Video's release of Horrors of Malformed Men. And if you are at all between these movies, if you're like, oh, Orgies of Edo, that has a look at that bowl with torches attached to his horns. That seems like a movie I want to see. I would highly recommend that you watch Horrors of Malformed Men before you kind of go back and check out Orgies of Edo or Blind Woman's Curse, another Taro Ishii film that Arrow has released. I think both of them are kind of more fully formed examples of this subgenre of pink film. He's working in the subgenre of like grotesque eroticism that he's working in here, because this is his first one of those. He had been making a bunch of Yakuza films, and he wanted to change, and Toei, the film company he was working for, was like ready to dive into these making pink films, and they were like, okay, go for it, Ishii, make your crazy pervert movie, which he does with aplomb, and it is there are wild things in here. It's structured like an anthology, so there are three segments, three kind of separate stories that does have this central doctor character who kind of winds through it and kind of connects the stories a little bit, but he doesn't really, like the doctor doesn't really pay off until the third and final story. But it's almost like a Japanese like Caligula. It's almost framed like a expose on like during the Edo period of Japan. All these like, you know, samurais and geishas and lords and ladies and feudal landholders. They were all messed up. They were all like dark perverted hearts, and we're gonna tell you like how it really was. That's how the movie's kind of framed. It escalates. It starts with kind of like the most tepid sequence, kind of the most potboiler, a young woman kind of tricked into being a geisha by her lover, who she really thinks is going to kind of come and rescue her and her sister, but he doesn't. He's like a scumbag. Then we have a woman who's kind of the guy who's in love with her he's like I can't seem to please you because you have such a messed up view towards like love, and what can I do for you? And it just like he gets her all these crazy things, and it ends very poorly for them. And then there's the final sequence, which is really the standout moment of the film. It's what this new art from Arrow comes from. It's about this lord who's just drunk with power, who's like having these like parties where he's having half of the party guests and the dancers killed for his entertainment. It's really wild stuff, and it's really crazy. And as with all of Taro Ishii's movies, at least all the ones I've seen, the production value is incredible. These kind of Alejandro Jodorowsky-esque setups of like this couldn't possibly happen in real life, or this isn't reality. It's this heightened reality, this dream world, this nightmarish dream world, but less than in something like Horrors of Malformed Men. Again, if you're gonna go for one of his movies and you haven't seen any of them, I would go with those other ones before I worked my way down to Orgies of Edo. But it is very interesting. It is a kind of transitional film, and Arrow does. There's not a ton of features on here. There's one longer interview with a film scholar where he kind of puts the movie in its context, and there's a little booklet like they always do. There's not a ton on here. It's not overflowing with features like Horrors of Malformed Men is, because I feel like Arrow's kind of admitting that this maybe is a lesser movie, or it's more interesting once you place it in the context of the director's other work, but still very, very happy to have seen it. For this week's book recommendation, I wanted to kind of springboard off a great grotesque Japanese auteur from one medium into a great grotesque Japanese auteur in another medium. So we're going to talk about Junji Ito's Uzumaki, Ito's kind of masterwork that reads like a novel. A lot of manga, because they are serialized storytelling, to me reads a little bit disjointed, reads a little bit like kind of story of the week, or in some cases kind of like Lone Ranger serial cliffhanger type storytelling. And there's a little bit of that in Uzumaki, but it feels very novelistic. It feels very much of a piece. It starts out where we're exploring this town in Japan. We've got kind of two teenage kids, they're friends, and the guy tells the girl, like, this town is infested with spirals, and she doesn't really know what he means. She thinks it's this kind of like, you know, like, that's weird. How can you be infested with spirals? But we get these increasingly more grotesque and increasingly more apocalyptic occurrences of like spirals. People start turning into snails. Her father, who is a potter who makes pottery, begins creating more and more weird and intricate spirals in his on his clay wheel, on his pottery wheel. It's really unsettling. It's really creepy. The art is incredible, as all of Junji Ito's art is. There's a story in here I especially love. His mother tries to kind of avoid spirals at all costs. She's trying to get rid of all the spirals, like on her fingertips. She's like, oh, my fingerprints are spirals. She cuts them off. It's really gross. And then she finds out in the doctor's office that the small bone in our ears are actually in the shape of a spiral. So it goes a bad place. But it is a creepy, unsettling. It's really long for manga. It does feel like a kind of meaty novel. If you haven't read Ito's work before, if you've read Tomi or some of his short works, his short stories, again, this feels much more novelistic, feels much more like this is a big masterwork that I can really dive into. It's really, really good. And this I guess Viz put this out in this one kind of hardbound edition, because I think it's usually in 2 volumes or maybe 3 volumes, but I would go for this if you can find it on Amazon. I'll put the link down in the description, as I put the links for everything. But if you can swing this, I wouldn't read it digitally, because I don't think comics read well digitally. This is a beautiful edition, and I would pick this up if you can. I don't know if it's still in print, because I got this a few years ago, but hopefully it is. Alright, that was 2 movies and a piece of literature to enjoy. I'm Adam Caesar. I also write books. If you want to check out any of those, you can click on the link below to go to my website, find out about them. If you go join my mailing list, I'll send you a free sample. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I will see you next week.